Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome. This is the Public Program Committee's brand new program that we've just started. It's called Democracy Update. I'm Teresa Jenkins, and I am chair of the Public Programs Committee. We've got people still entering the room, and this is going to be a really informative and exciting program. But these democracy updates are short programs. They're designed to highlight any actions, policies, laws, and their impact on our communities. So tonight, we're going to be exploring tariffs. Next Wednesday at the same time, 5 o'clock, we're going to hear from the nation's largest union of registered nurses, National Nurses United. They reached out to us and asked if they could make a presentation on Medicare for all. So we're going to be honoring their request and doing that next Wednesday. So if you haven't signed up, be sure to do that. You can do that on our website, but you'll also get a notice in your mailbox in the newsletter. Um, Speaking of your newsletter, these democracy updates are recorded, and we will be putting the link for tonight's recording in your newsletter. So that all you have to do is click on that, and for anybody that misses it, it'll be there in their inbox Monday morning. They can also find it on our website. So that's it's important for a lot of people that are not here yet. We'll make sure that they are able to see these programs. So we, excuse me, we've asked for questions in advance, and we have received a few. And Professor Frisvold has said that he would like to wait to the end of the program if you have questions. So just go ahead and use the raised hand emoji. Make sure that we see your questions rather than putting them in the chat. I may miss them. So just use the raised hand emoji, and we'll be certainly try and take as many questions as possible. So our speaker this evening is Professor George Frisvold, College of Agriculture and Life Science at the University of Arizona. And he's going to address how the latest rounds of tariffs impact agriculture and farming in Arizona. Professor Frisvold, there are a lot of people here that know you and know of your work. Was there anything you'd like to share regarding your background before we get started with your program?
Yeah, a little bit. Once upon a time, I worked in Washington, D.C., and I kind of did things opposite. A lot of times people go from academia to policy, and I was a USDA policy analyst. I was the chief of the resource policy branch. And then for 1 year, I was detailed to the President's Council of Economic Advisors, and I was a senior economist there for agriculture, natural resources, and trade. So I got a lot of exposure to trade, working for the White House for a little over a year. Um, People have asked me what it's like now in this environment to be doing trade economics, and I say it's a little like being a paleontologist in a Jurassic Park movie. It's like we know what would happen in theory, what would happen if you unleashed certain things that shouldn't be unleashed. And so now it's on some level, it's kind of academically fascinating to see what happens, even though it's somewhat frightening.
Yes, I can imagine. It's frightening to us.
Yes.
Yes. Well, so we obviously we're hearing so much about the effects of tariffs in the Midwest, the soybean farmers. But we want to know what's happening here in our backyard. So thank you for being with us tonight and sharing your knowledge about the impact of these tariffs here in Arizona.
Sure. I'm going to inflict some slides on you folks. I can. Here we go. So, can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is a quote from David Kelly, the chief global strategist for JP Morgan Asset Management. And he says the trouble with tariffs, to be succinct, is that they raise prices, slow economic growth, cut profits, increase unemployment, worsen inequality, diminish productivity, and increase global tensions. Other than that, they're fine. And this has been kind of the economic consensus over the last 30 years as tariff rates internationally have climbed down and down and down and down up until 2025, where in the US they shot up dramatically. So, what I'm going to talk about today partly is we did a briefing last spring for Governor Hobbs, and we developed some new methods to measure the role of ag exports in Arizona's economy. And that's actually also just come out in a peer reviewed article because we had to use some new fancy methods to get at these numbers. So this is the link to that article. And the lead authors were Claudia Montanilla and Dari Duvall on that paper. Okay.
Professor, I think we're on slide 12. Is that where you want us to be?
No, you should be on slide 2.
Mm.
Yeah, we're seeing 12 on our screen.
That's weird. Let me. Can you
Yes.
see? Can you see it now? Okay, I'm gonna take it off of slide mode. I don't know what's the matter. Can you all see this now? It says hot off the press. Is the
Yes, we're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so again, this is work I did with Claudia and Dari, and so here's some basic numbers. This is Arizona food and agricultural exports. And to go down kind of the first categories, primary agriculture, this is things, produced on farm. Then it goes down to food and fiber manufacturing. So this is like processed foods. And then agricultural input suppliers. And these are all estimated exports from trade data out of Arizona. And then the next column is the share of Arizona agricultural exports. And so you can see that like 43% of it is like manufactured food, 40% is like on farm production. And then we have the total sales export are about $15 billion. The last column is exports as a share of total sales in the state. And I've circled cotton because you see that 88% of Arizona cotton is exported. That's probably a conservative number because sometimes cotton might be, let's say, shipped to California, then bundled with other California cotton and shipped on. So that 88% is actually probably a conservative estimate. And, for things like fruit, it's 39%. For vegetables and melons, it's 9%. A lot of that 9% is going to Canada. Other crops and hay, we ship a lot of hay to the Gulf states and to China. And this is important because this is a measure of how sensitive these commodities might be to retaliatory tariffs. So Arizona cotton producers really depend on export markets. So if retaliatory tariffs hit them, they'd be especially hard hit. Here's the destination of Arizona's primary agriculture. So about a third goes to China, about a quarter goes to Canada, only 4% goes to Mexico. But if you look at China, Canada, and Mexico, they're about 62% of our ag exports. Now we don't export a lot to Mexico, but agricultural imports from Mexico are really important for Arizona's economy. And all this debate about trade, and whether trade is fair or not, you hear this narrative over and over again about, oh, trade is going to take away American jobs. We need to bring American jobs back. But fresh produce shipments that come through Nogales actually contributed, almost $1 billion in sales in Arizona and supported almost 5,000 jobs. So that importation of products from Mexico is actually a big source of jobs. It's the single largest private employer in Santa Cruz County. And that's the thing I think people don't appreciate is that uh, Southern Arizona economy is benefits from shipments coming up from Nogales, and a lot of the trade disruptions has disrupted that industry. Okay, so this is from results from an input output model. I don't know if you were following the news this week. The Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 economists studying innovation. Quite a while ago, Vasily Leontiev got a Nobel Prize in economics for what is called developing input output models. And an input output models shows how sales and demand in one part of the economy generate sales and demand and income in other parts of the economy. And so let's look at that first column of employment. So the direct effects are the people who are directly employed in farming, ag input supply companies, food manufacturing. Then there's on that far row, it says indirect effects. Well, this is all the jobs of people who supply inputs to those agricultural and food industries. So you wouldn't, if you didn't have those agricultural and food industries, they wouldn't be buying inputs and you wouldn't have those jobs in Arizona. Then the next line is induced effects. These are when people who are employed in farming and they're earning profits from farming, they go out and spend their money on consumer goods, right? They buy electronics, they buy all kinds of, they go out to dinner, they buy new cars. These are all things that wouldn't happen if these folks didn't have their income. So while there's a direct contribution of exports of like 4,422 jobs, when you look at all the ripple effects of the economy, it's over 7,000 jobs. And you can go along and you can see like the total sales value is almost $2 billion. And again, the model shows how much tax revenue is generated for the state of Arizona by this export activity, and that's over $167 million. Okay, but this slide shows it's where business owner income and expenses go. And again, this is primary agriculture. This is on farm. The other is ag input suppliers. This is like chemical companies, fertilizer companies, farm machinery companies, and then food and fiber processing. So there's mostly processed food in Arizona and also fiber manufacturing, things from cotton. So input costs are a big chunk of all these businesses' total revenues. And then there's employee compensation, there's taxes, and those green numbers on top, that's the percent basically of what business owners are keeping. So in primary ag, business owners are making about 20%, or their total output is like 20% once you deduct all the input costs. For input suppliers and food manufacturing, it's 7 and 6%. So the margins are pretty small. So when we were trying to do analysis, it's very, very hard to do something. It's like, what's the effect of tariffs? Because it's slowed down a little bit, but at the height, the tariff rates, and tariffs are just taxes. Tariffs are taxes on inputs. The tariffs rate were changing, every week. And in some cases, the tariff rates would change in the course of a day. They would go from like 0 to 50% to 0 again. So if you say, what's the effects of tariffs? It's really, really difficult. There's the Yale Budget Lab does studies like every 2 weeks where they try to update what's going on. We didn't really do that because we thought anything we present and a given day could be very, very different the next day. But what we looked at was the tariffs make, it's a tax on the inputs that these industries use. And we don't know exactly how much the tariffs are going to increase their costs, but we did this exercise. It's like, well, what happens if tariffs make their costs go up 1%? How much does that reduce their income? So if you increase producer costs by 1%, primary ag loses 3% of their profits. Ag input suppliers lose 13% of their profits. Food and fiber manufacturers lose 14% of your profits just for a 1% cost. Let's go all the way down to the bottom. What if there is an 8% increase in their costs? Well, farmers would lose 25% income. And basically, these numbers go above 100%. So these ag input suppliers and food manufacturers would they'd be making no profit. They'd be losing money, and they couldn't stay in business. So what this chart tells you is the extent to how much can businesses absorb in higher costs if they don't increase their output prices. And you could see that even like with a 5% cost increase, especially for input suppliers and food manufacturers, you're taking away about 2/3 of their profit. And again, that's 2/3 of somebody's income. No one wants to lose 2/3 of their income. So it shows you that there's a lot of pressure if you think there's going to be costs that are higher for a long time to start passing that on to consumers or buyers of your product. Now, there's a lot of debate about what the effect of tariffs are. So the president had said, well, it's these exporting countries are the ones that are paying. Well, in theory, with any tax, a certain amount of the tax gets passed on to consumers, and the business owners might have to lower their prices, and it's called eating, some of the tax. The evidence shows that exporters are not eating the tariff. So in theory, exporters may not be able to pass all the costs of tariffs on to U.S. consumers and businesses. And if that were true, if they couldn't pass on the cost, we would expect the prices that they're getting to go down. And you could see from March of this year, you had Liberation Day, April 2nd, where a bunch of tariffs were introduced. And you see these are the prices that exporters are getting. And these are the prices basically that people have to pay to get stuff into the US. So in practice, exporters aren't lowering their prices. And what does this mean? It means that American importers are basically paying the tax. Businesses are paying the tax to the extent that the importers and businesses are passing on that to their consumers. Households are paying the cost of this tax increase. So basically, all the costs of the tariff, it looks like so far, are being eaten by American businesses and households to different degrees. So there's some early signs of accelerating farm input cost inflation. So the most recent data we have is from August of 2025. And so year over year, from last August to this August, farm input costs rose 9.9%. From July to August, there was an increase of 0.9%. Well, the next line is annualized. It's like, well, what if you had a 0.9% increase every month of the year? Well, that corresponds to more than a 10% inflation rate over the course of the year. From March to August, from before Liberation Day, April 2nd, to August, just over those months, prices went up 2.8%. From March to August, when you annualize that, that's at a 6.7 annual rate. So from March to August, the annualized rate was 6.7, but just from July to August, it's 10.4. So that kind of indicates that inflation in farm input prices is heating up. And here it's shown in a different way. So these are the annualized input price inflation. That 2% red line, that's the inflation rate the Federal Reserve is trying to get for the whole economy, the overall inflation rate. And you can see that the farm inflation rates are quite a bit higher than that. And from June, July, August, you're starting to see an uptick in the inflation rate. Although it's still kind of early days, we'll wait to see what happens if and when we get September and October numbers. So farmers are starting to feel the squeeze of higher input costs. Now let's look back historically. Again, if you in the press, there's been talk about like using some of the tax money from the tariffs to subsidize farmers to take away the sting of things like the Chinese limits on U.S. soybean exports. And so even though you can see there's comparing the first Obama administration, second Obama administration, Trump's first administration, the Biden administration. So net farm income under Trump was 10 to 13% lower than in the Obama administrations and 27% lower than under Biden. So then another thing, the blue part is what I call net market income. So this is income just that you get from market, from selling to people, not from what you're getting from a government check. And so under Trump, it was 21 to 25% lower than under Obama and 36% lower than under Biden. And so government payments were about 10% of net farm income under Obama and Biden, but 20% of farm income under Trump in the first Trump administration. So this means that 1 in 5 net farm income dollars came from taxpayer-funded government payments. And we had a trade war during the first Trump administration, and soybeans were also hit hard. And so a lot of money was thrown at farmers, but even with that extra money thrown at farmers, almost a double amount than administrations before and after, farm income was still quite a bit lower. Okay, so retaliatory tariffs actually have been pretty temporary and muted so far. So Russia and Canada had announced various retaliatory tariffs. They pulled back on those. The EU had also threatened certain retaliatory tariffs. They've kind of pulled back on that. China is the big exception with keeping other trade restrictions and retaliations. So economists had studied what happened during the trade war with China during the first Trump administration. And what studies found then was all the US tariff costs were borne by US households and businesses. So basically, China didn't lower their prices at all. Basically, Americans paid the full cost of the tax. So it was a big tax increase on Americans. Another thing that the tariffs did in the first Trump administration was that a lot of the tariffs were on inputs that American companies buy, which made US manufacturing less competitive because the taxes were on inputs they used, which meant that if you're producing cars, you're producing airplanes, you're producing things that you want to sell in the world market, suddenly that's more expensive. And so one of the things the tariffs did the first time around is it actually made US manufacturing less competitive in world markets. Now, in the first trade war, during the first Trump administration, China instituted a number of retaliatory tariffs. But what economists had estimated was that while the US households and businesses paid the cost of US tariffs, mostly Chinese households and businesses paid the cost of the Chinese retaliatory tariffs. So I think the reason we're not seeing as much retaliatory tariffs from other countries now is they looked and said, if we retaliate, we're only going to harm our own people and our own businesses. So we're kind of like not really do that. And so here's the effects of the first US-China trade war for non-economists. So the US didn't like various Chinese policies, and they said, we don't like your policies, so I'm going to teach you a lesson. And I have the little figure stepping on a rake because all the costs of the tariff policy were borne by US industries and consumers. And then China decided to retaliate. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll teach you a lesson. So China instituted policies which essentially were like stepping on a rake. So a lesson we had from the first round of trade wars in the first Trump administration was that countries were just their tariffs, their trade policies were only harming themselves. Okay, summing up. So combined, ag export and import activities contribute more than $3 billion in sales to Arizona's economy, and they support more than 12,000 Arizona jobs. Arizona cotton is highly export dependent and it would be vulnerable to retaliatory tariffs. And there are some retaliatory measures that China is instituting, but it hasn't really shown up in cotton markets and cotton prices. One of the things that's happened is what's called trade diversion. So more US cotton is going to Bangladesh and in India and other textile producing countries. We ship the cotton over there. Textiles are a very labor intensive production method. And so instead of US cotton going to China, it's going to Indonesia, it's going to Thailand, it's going to Malaysia, it's going to Bangladesh, it's going to India, where they have textiles there. That means that cotton, let's say from Brazil, is going to China. So countries are moving things around to adjust. So we're not seeing big effects of retaliation just yet. The evidence to date suggests that US households and business are paying for the tariffs. That basically exporters are not paying it. It's basically US folks. And this represents actually a significant tax increase on US households. I mean, there was a lot of talk about tax cuts in the last budget bill, but this is an example of fairly large tax increases. There's some evidence that farm input price inflation may be heating up, but it's still early to see how much that's going to be. And there's my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out, happy to talk to them. And I am now available for any and all questions people might have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And we'll be looking for the raised hands here, but I did have a few people that couldn't make it this evening. They sent some questions in advance, so I'll just go ahead and start. One of them wanted me to ask you about Asian markets, particularly relative to cotton, and what's going on there.
Well, as I said, there's what's called trade diversion. So US cotton isn't going to China to the extent that it was. And actually, we lost a lot of share of the Chinese cotton market from the last trade war. So if you even after kind of things subsided, the US never regained its market share in cotton or soybeans that it lost during the first trade war. And so again, we've tried to go to different markets. So, it's going to Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Bangladesh, India. And again, countries can kind of shift who they ship things to. But when you have like long established trade relationships, when you change that, there's a cost to it. The way I think about it is like we all have the gas station we go to. We all have the grocery store we go to. We all have the pharmacy we go to. What if you were suddenly told you can't do that now? Okay, you would go to another grocery store. You would move around and do things, but it's like you'd be driving a lot more. So there's a lot of inefficiency. So there's adjustments. Businesses are gonna do adjustments to avoid the tariffs, but even those adjustments are costly.
Before we get to D, I just wanted to ask kind of a follow-up on that one. So
Mhm.
we've never regained from the first trade war when it comes to
Mhm.
cotton. Is there anything else that we've not
Yeah,
regained from the first
soybeans.
soybeans?
Yeah, soybeans. I mean, Brazil. That's the thing. Brazil really picked up a huge amount of our soybean market. And that's kind of problematic. A thing you don't think about. It's like one of the ways they've done that is increased tropical deforestation.
Mm,
Uh,
wow.
So
uh,
there's environmental consequences of this.
Yes, there certainly are. D, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
the quote at the beginning was so good, but I couldn't find my notepad to find out where it was. Do you mind going over the quote again about tariffs?
Sure, I could do that. And again, if I could send you the slides, or I can send you the quote. Yeah, let me see what the quote was. Yeah. Uh, Come on. My computer is being slow.
Uh,
No worry. Why are you doing this? I'm sorry. I have
it's
an
okay.
ancient computer that's misbehaving.
Uh,
What?
you can send it to Teresa when it works and she can get it out to all of us.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm
That
having.
Happy
was
to
such a
do
good,
that.
such
Yeah,
a good quote.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of like it does all these bad things. Aside from that, it's fine.
Yes, I love it.
Right. Okay, next up is Marge.
Hi. You're talking about the tariffs impacting the farming market. Maybe this is next month's project, but how about the employee disruption because of the ICE raids and that type of thing?
Um, I was looking at wage rates, like farm wage rates, to see if those had shot up, and you don't really see anything in the data yet. And I think part of what's going on there is that a lot of the ICE raids are kind of symbolic, right? They're grabbing people in cities, right? You're not seeing film footage of like ICE people going to farms or ICE people going to meat packing plants. Um, about half of the U.S. ag labor force is undocumented. And so I think they kind of right now, again, that farming constituency has supported Trump. So I think what's going on is that they're being more or less left alone. So
Mm,
you have these high profile, high visibility things going on, but they're not really going on farms. I mean, there's like, again, they'll pick on a couple of farms in blue states like California, but again, talking to growers here, no, nobody's, people aren't being raided, and in Florida, they rely really heavily on undocumented workers, and ICE isn't going there.
right. It's very true. It's where I came from is Florida, and absolutely. I mean, you don't see ice there. You don't see ice out there with the strawberries, and no, no, they're not there. Um, Another question that came in prior to this presentation was about, I guess I can combine these two questions together. Are you aware of any farmers or any ranchers who have filed for bankruptcy? And are you aware of any farms that might be in jeopardy of being taken over by big corporations because they might be just leaving too much business or just don't have the work, don't have the staff?
I don't know Arizona numbers. I know the Federal Reserve Bank at Minnesota has been tracking bankruptcies, and there's been an uptick in farm bankruptcies. But a lot of those are in the Midwest. I'm not aware of it being a big phenomena in Arizona yet.
Yet, but there's a potential of that
Oh
happening.
yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? That's yes, Bob.
I was wondering if the oh, just slipped my mind what I wanted to ask. Oh, the sort of on and off today, it's 100% increase in tariffs on China, and then if they back off and they make a deal, does that have any impact on prices or the marketplace? Because it seems like it's very stop and go. It's not like a coherent policy.
Yeah. Well, I teach a policy class, and part of what I do is trade policy. And for the students, I said, okay, so here's the syllabus. Here's how many points are for homework. Here's how much points are for the test. Here are the points for the final. Now, that's what they are today, but I'm going to change them next week. So the homework assignment you might do this week might be no points. It might be 100% of your grade, but you don't know. So you guys go out and study accordingly, and that's how I'm going to do it. And they didn't. Some of them didn't realize I was joking to make a point. They had this look of horror, because it's like, well, how can you plan? I said, see, you can't plan. Yeah, and the uncertainty is a big drag because you don't know. For example, the folks that ship fresh produce across the border in Nogales, they have to set prices. They have to make contracts about, I'm going to send this much volume at this price. And if you don't, if there's a tax of a huge amount on that, it means either you're making money or you're losing the money, and you've signed a contract to deliver this stuff. And so either you don't honor your contract, and there's all this legal, repercussions of doing that, or you take the loss. So it's incredibly hard for people to plan and invest. It makes it really, really hard. And again, right now in the US, there's all this investment in AI and the data centers. And that kind of masks the negative effects of the tariffs and other kinds of investment.
Thanks. Teresa, you're muted.
Thank you. That answer your question, Bob? We're good? Anybody else have any questions? Well, this has been extremely informative. I know one of the things that you said this evening is something that we all need to keep focus on is how much more, can businesses absorb in higher cost if they don't start increasing their prices? And we all may be feeling the effects of that. So it's something that we all need to be and will be paying attention to. So this was very informative, and I look forward to receiving the slides. I know there's a lot of people that that would like to see them. So, well, thanks for your time this evening.
Okay, sure enough, it's been fun. Thank you.
Good. All right.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. It was good seeing you, and hopefully we'll see you next week where we'll be talking Medicare for all. Take care of yourselves, and thanks for all that you do for democracy. Good night.
Good night.